August 14th, the day the modern world simply stopped. It did not happen with a deafening explosion or a flash of blinding light in the sky. It happened in complete, terrifying silence. Across the globe, at exactly the same synchronized millisecond, the screens of 500 major hospitals, central banks, and critical power grids simultaneously flickered and went entirely black. Medical ventilators in intensive care units switched to emergency battery power. Air traffic control radar monitors in London, Tokyo, and New York displayed nothing but a flashing red cursor. The global financial system, a network moving trillions of dollars every minute, froze completely. And then the message appeared, a single line of glowing green text, slowly typing itself across millions of locked monitors. You have been compromised. Send the payment or watch it all burn. In a matter of hours, governments were thrown into a state of absolute panic. The immediate assumption was an act of war, a coordinated state-sponsored cyber attack initiated by a hostile foreign power. The Pentagon went to DEFCON 3. Interpol launched the largest digital manhunt in the history of human civilization. Task forces were mobilized. Intelligence agencies opened their most classified playbooks. And billions of dollars were immediately authorized to track down this faceless, godlike syndicate of Russian or North Korean hackers. But the truth was infinitely more disturbing than any foreign invasion. The architect of the most devastating ransomware attack in human history was not hiding in a freezing concrete bunker in Moscow. He was not operating from a secret military compound in Pyongyang. He was sitting directly inside the Situation Room of the United States Pentagon. He was drinking a cup of black coffee, calmly reviewing the emergency response protocols, and watching the most powerful military and intelligence apparatus on Earth scramble in absolute terror. He was watching them hunt a ghost that he had created. And the most terrifying part of this entire paradox is how he got there. How does the ultimate weapon of mass digital destruction bypass the billion-dollar firewalls of the American government? The answer is chilling in its simplicity. It never bypassed them. It was built inside them. To understand the magnitude of this betrayal, we have to rewind to the early 2000s. The landscape of global warfare was fundamentally shifting. The United States government realized that the next major conflict would not be fought with aircraft carriers or intercontinental ballistic missiles. It would be fought with code. The new front line was the digital infrastructure that controlled water filtration plants, nuclear centrifuges, and stock exchanges. In response to this invisible threat, agencies like the NSA and the newly formed Cyber Command began aggressively recruiting the most brilliant, obsessive, and dangerous minds they could find. They did not want soldiers. They wanted hackers. They wanted the kind of people who saw the digital world not as a tool, but as a living, breathing ecosystem with vital organs waiting to be manipulated. And among these recruits was a man we will call the architect. On paper, his credentials were unimpeachable. He possessed a mind that could read complex source code like a native language, spotting microscopic anomalies that entire teams of senior engineers would completely miss. The government gave him the highest level of security clearance imaginable. They handed him the master blueprints to the kingdom. His job was to analyze the vulnerabilities of the nation's most critical infrastructure, find the weak points, and build an impenetrable fortress around them. They trusted him to be the ultimate shield. But the architect did not view the system the way his superiors did. When he looked at the intricate webs connecting global banking, military logistics, and civilian power grids, he did not see a fortress to be defended. He saw a rotting, fragile house of cards. He realized that the foundations of modern society were built on outdated, hastily written code, patched together over decades. And with that realization came an intoxicating, dangerous sense of power. He understood that the people in charge, the generals with stars on their shoulders and the politicians in their tailored suits, had absolutely no idea how vulnerable they actually were. He was the only one who could see the cracks in the dam. And instead of filling those cracks, he decided to do something unprecedented. Whenever he discovered a critical zero-day vulnerability, a flaw in a software so secret and so devastating that there was no existing defense against it, he did not report it. He did not log it into the official security database. He carefully, methodically extracted it. He built a shadow inventory, a private arsenal of digital weapons hidden deep within encrypted servers that only he knew existed. For years, the government paid him a lucrative salary to secure their networks, while he was quietly stockpiling the exact tools needed to bring those very networks to their knees. He was the locksmith hired to build the most secure vault in the world, and he was secretly making copies of every single master key for himself. He watched the generals congratulate themselves on their impenetrable cyber defenses, knowing all the while that he held the power to shatter their illusion at any given moment. This was not about ideology. This was not about serving a foreign nation. This was about pure, unadulterated control. He was breeding a virus inside the very laboratory designed to cure it. And as he sat in that highly classified briefing room, listening to the desperate strategies of the FBI directors and NSA chiefs trying to mitigate the disaster he had unleashed, he felt a surge of absolute supremacy. The system had trusted him to build the ultimate lock, but they never stopped to ask themselves one fundamental, fatal question. What happens when the architect of the fortress decides he wants to watch it burn to the ground? The ransomware attack was not an invasion of the system. It was an infection, born from within. When the architect finally released his shadow inventory, it spread through the global networks, not by breaking through the billion-dollar firewalls, but by walking right past them using authentic, high-level administrative credentials. He designed the malicious code to mimic the exact digital signature of a classified, top-secret maintenance update. It was a digital Trojan horse wrapped in the American flag. The execution was flawless, methodical, and utterly devastating. Millions of devices were infected silently over the course of weeks before the final payload was detonated on August 14th. And when the trap finally snapped shut, the world descended into sheer, unadulterated chaos. The demands for payment were not issued in traceable bank transfers. They were demanded in an obscure, highly encrypted cryptocurrency, designed to vanish into a labyrinth of blockchain ledgers. It was a perfect, untraceable extortion scheme. And the panic that gripped the world's elite was intoxicating to the man who had orchestrated it. He watched the news footage of the United States president addressing a terrified nation, declaring a state of national cyber emergency. He watched the stock market hemorrhage trillions of dollars in market value within hours of the opening bell. The most powerful corporations on Earth, the untouchable conglomerates that controlled global trade, were suddenly reduced to begging for a decryption key. He saw the world's leading intelligence agencies running blind, frantically chasing IP addresses that bounced through proxy servers across 5 different continents. The FBI and NSA established joint task forces, pulling their best analysts into round-the-clock crisis centers. They analyzed the sophisticated architecture of the ransomware, marveling at the genius and sheer malevolence of the code. They concluded that only a heavily funded, state-sponsored cyber warfare division could have possibly engineered an attack of this magnitude. They were utterly convinced they were hunting an army of elite Russian or Chinese operatives. The irony was suffocating. The architect was not just watching the hunt, he was leading it. During the day, he stood in classified briefing rooms at the Pentagon, his face grave and focused. He wore a sharp, tailored suit. He delivered highly technical presentations to congressional committees and 4-star generals, confidently outlining theoretical strategies to track down the mysterious international syndicate responsible for the catastrophic attack. He analyzed the very code he had written, pointing out its brilliant evasion techniques to the awe of his colleagues. He was the government's golden boy, the brilliant mind they relied on to save them from the digital apocalypse. But when the sun, went down, the reality was terrifyingly different. In the quiet solitude of his apartment, he accessed the encrypted dark web forums where the ransom payments were being deposited. He watched the balance of his hidden cryptocurrency wallets swell by tens of millions of dollars every single day. The corporations and hospitals, desperate to regain access to their vital data, were paying the ransom silently, fueling his invisible empire. He was playing the ultimate twisted game of chess against the most powerful nations on Earth. He was both the mastermind behind the greatest cyber attack in history and the lead investigator hunting himself. He was generating the virus, and he was being paid a 6-figure government salary to find a cure that he already possessed. The power was absolute. He had bypassed the entire global financial system, creating a shadow economy where he was the sole, undisputed king. The money was abstract, numbers on a screen, but the control was absolute and intoxicating. He felt like a god standing over a world of ants, watching them scurry in panic at his command. But power, absolute and unchecked, breeds a fatal disease: arrogance. He had convinced himself that he was smarter than the combined intelligence of the United States government. He believed his system was flawless, his identity permanently erased from the digital footprint of his crimes. He had built a fortress of encryption so complex that no supercomputer could crack it. But he forgot the one fundamental vulnerability that brings down every empire in history. He forgot about the human element. The architect had designed the perfect crime, but he was still just a man, and men make mistakes. The beginning of his downfall did not come from a brilliant deduction by an FBI analyst, or a sophisticated counter-hack by the NSA. It came from a microscopic shift in the very system he thought he controlled. In a desperate, sweeping attempt to contain the spread of the ransomware, the Pentagon initiated a massive internal security upgrade. They completely overhauled their internal firewall protocols, shutting down thousands of external access points. In doing so, they inadvertently severed the architect's secure, encrypted connection to his offshore cryptocurrency wallets from within the Pentagon's network. For the first time since the attack began, he was cut off from his empire. He could not see the millions of dollars pouring into his accounts. The silence was deafening. The loss of control, even momentarily, was something his arrogant mind could not tolerate. Paranoia, the silent killer of every mastermind, began to creep in. He needed to check the balance. He needed to know the money was still there, untouched and secure. But he could not do it from his classified workstation. He had a strict, unbreakable rule. He never accessed his illicit empire outside of his heavily fortified, multi-layered, encrypted environment. But the need to see the numbers, the addiction to the power he had amassed, overpowered his discipline. He made a decision that would unravel his entire carefully constructed universe. He broke his own cardinal rule. He stepped out of his secure bubble. He left the Pentagon, his mind racing with a mixture of anxiety and an overwhelming need for validation. He walked 3 blocks down the street, clutching his personal, heavily modified laptop. He didn't go to a secure safe house. He didn't use a burner phone. He walked into a crowded Starbucks. He sat down at a small table, surrounded by people drinking lattes and typing on their smartphones. He opened his laptop, and he connected to the public, unencrypted Wi-Fi network. It was the most ordinary, mundane action imaginable, and it was the most catastrophic mistake of his life. For exactly 45 seconds, he accessed the dark web to check the balance of his cryptocurrency wallets. 45 seconds of unencrypted exposure. He saw the numbers, the millions of dollars sitting safely in the ledger. A wave of relief washed over him. He closed the laptop, confident that his secret was still safe. But he was wrong. He had vastly underestimated the very system he had mocked for so long. The United States government did not possess a magical algorithm capable of cracking his encryption. They did not have a satellite that could track his thoughts. What they did have was an incredibly boring, automated billion-dollar dragnet that was meticulously searching for one specific digital fingerprint. The FBI had deployed a primitive but effective system to monitor the cryptocurrency wallets associated with the ransomware payments. They were waiting for the money to move. They were waiting for a ping. For months, the wallets had been accessed through complex, routed proxy servers bouncing from Russia to Switzerland to the Seychelles. But when the architect opened his laptop in that Starbucks, in his moment of arrogant panic, he bypassed his own elaborate security protocols. He connected directly. The FBI's automated system didn't flag a sophisticated hack. It flagged an IP address. And that IP address did not belong to a server farm in Eastern Europe. It belonged to a commercial internet provider, specifically a coffee shop located exactly 3 blocks away from the United States Pentagon. The geographic proximity was not just suspicious, it was a screaming siren in the dark. The correlation between the timing of his access and the location of the coffee shop was an anomaly that no amount of encryption could hide. It was the digital equivalent of dropping a loaded gun with your fingerprints on it, right outside a police station. The FBI did not send a heavily armed tactical unit. They didn't rappel from helicopters or deploy flashbang grenades. The climax of the largest digital manhunt in human history was painfully, almost comically, ordinary. 2 local plainclothes detectives, men who usually investigated fraud and embezzlement, walked into the crowded coffee shop. They saw a man in a tailored suit, the very same suit he had worn while briefing Congress on national cybersecurity, quietly drinking a caramel macchiato. The contrast was absolute and devastating. Here was the mastermind capable of bringing the global economy to a standstill, the phantom who had humiliated the greatest intelligence agencies on Earth, being quietly handcuffed next to a display of pastries. The arrest was not a cinematic shootout. It was a silent, bureaucratic surrender. But the true horror of this story does not end with a man in handcuffs. The architect was captured, his secret life exposed, his millions in cryptocurrency seized by the very government he had manipulated. But the weapon he built, the devastating ransomware that had crippled hospitals and grounded airlines, was never fully contained. It was a digital virus, and viruses mutate. The source code, the blueprint for global destruction that he had meticulously crafted, leaked onto the dark web shortly after his arrest. It became the foundation for 1,000 new, independent cyber attacks. The world's infrastructure, the banks, the power grids, the hospitals, were still running on the same fragile, patched-together systems that he had exploited. He had shown the world exactly how the magic trick was done. And now, thousands of copycats were attempting the same illusion. The architect sits in a federal maximum security prison, stripped of his keyboards and his access to the digital realm he once ruled like a god. He is a contained threat. But the legacy he left behind is far more terrifying than the man himself. The systems that protect our modern lives, the digital walls that stand between order and chaos, are still vulnerable. They are still built by men, and men are still arrogant, fallible, and corruptible. The government caught the man who built the bomb, but they never stopped the countdown. The blueprints for devastation are out there, circulating in the dark corners of the internet, waiting for the next architect to find them. The digital apocalypse he envisioned did not end with his arrest. It merely evolved, and the most unsettling question remains unanswered. They caught the architect, but what about the design? It is still running silently, in the background of the very device you are using right now. If you want to see how a group of college students managed to pull off the biggest gold heist in national history without firing a single shot, make sure to hit that subscribe button for our next declassified file.